cutting the corset and preparing for the sewing process. Tutorial 3. Calculating leather consumption and preparing the patterns. Let us look at the garment we are going to sew. It is a waist cincher or an under-bust corset with a waist restriction effect. The top edge is basically straight, only slightly raised in the middle of the front. The bottom edge is somewhat convex at the front and more or less straight at the sides and at the back. There are decorative lay-on elements at the sides of the corset with some applique on them. The corset performs a body control function, which means it is supposed to restrict the wearer's waist. I will account for this during the cutting. Let us calculate necessary alterations of the standard pattern. If you are sewing a corset for a distant client, it is enough to know 3 key measurements: under bust circumference, waist circumference, and stomach circumference taken 12 centimeters below the waistline. You can naturally use additional measurements if you can meet with your client and carry out fittings. I would not ask a distant client to take those additional measurements off herself because there is a great chance she will do it wrong. It makes sense to ask your client about her height in addition to the 3 key measurements. Any other measurements can be taken from a sizing chart. The table here features my client's measurements and measurements taken off the pattern, columns 3 and 2 correspondingly. There will be a gap between the lacing bars on my body control corset. I purposely leave this gap because of the waist restriction effect. The corset is likely to stretch out with time, and I must provide for an opportunity of lacing it tighter when the need comes. I usually make a gap of about 6 centimeters, but since a leather corset is rather thick, I will make it 5 centimeters. Personal experience tells me it should be enough. I subtract 5 centimeters from all clients' measurements and write the resulting values in column 4. In other words, these are new clients' measurements which will account for the gap between the lacing bars. These new values will be used in all further calculations. Now, let us calculate necessary alterations. I will write the values in column 5. Under bust circumference, 73 centimeters on the client and 70 centimeters on the pattern. 73 centimeters minus 70 centimeters equals 3 centimeters. Therefore, I need to add 3 centimeters to the under bust circumference. Waist circumference, 63 centimeters on the client and 59 centimeters on the pattern. 63 centimeters minus 59 centimeters equals 4 centimeters. I need to add 4 centimeters to the waist circumference. Stomach circumference, 85 centimeters on the client and 80 centimeters on the pattern. 85 centimeters minus 80 centimeters equals 5 centimeters. I need to add 5 centimeters to the stomach circumference or the bottom circumference of the corset. But my corset is supposed to restrict the client's waist, which means I need to make her waist circumference smaller. It is enough to remove 4 centimeters from the waist circumference for a mild restriction effect. In this particular case, it means I can simply use the initial client's measurement of 59 centimeters. I am not supposed to change the under bust and stomach circumferences. The final values for customizing the pattern are written in column 5 and 6 and account for the gap between the lacing bars and the desired degree of waist restriction. I leave the waist circumference as is. Add 3 centimeters to the under bust circumference and add 5 centimeters to stomach circumference. I have calculated all alterations which need to be applied to the standard corset pattern. Next, I print out the pattern. It is made of 5 pieces. I need to adjust them in correspondence with client's measurements. Under bust circumference. According to the calculations, I need to add 3 centimeters to the under bust circumference, 1.5 centimeters on each half of the corset. It is best to distribute this value between the side seams and the princess seams at the back. This means I need to shift each corresponding cutting line 0.35 centimeters outwards at the level of the under bust line. I shift it 0.4 centimeters outwards in the side seams and 0.3 centimeters outwards in the princess seams at the back. I carefully bring the new side seams and princess seams to the waistline using the pattern as a template. What concerns the stomach circumference, I need to add 5 centimeters, 2.5 centimeters on each half of the corset. Again, I will distribute it between the side seams and the princess seams at the back. I would not recommend using the front princess seams for this purpose. My client's proportions are rather balanced, so I just add 1 centimeter in each side seam and 0.2 centimeters in each back princess seam. And I redraw the lines gracefully with the help of the pattern. Please note that I start not from the ceinture and not from the waistline. The ceinture is dense, non-stretch bias tape that serves to prevent the corset from stretching out in the waist and help it hold its shape. Since regular ceinture is 2 centimeters wide, I step 2 centimeters down from the line that marks its top edge. Now I will adjust the central piece. Let me remind you that the top edge of the corset is raised in the middle of the front, while the rest of it is almost straight. The original pattern was made for a corset undergarment, which was supposed to add support to the wearer's bra. I move the center of the front of the corset up by literally 1 centimeter and redraw the top edge of the central front piece. I have adjusted the width of the corset. Now I need to cut out the altered pattern and adjust the length of the corset. Let me adjust the top edge of the corset. I pin the pieces together, aligning their sewing lines from the top to the waistline. And I redraw the top edge of the corset. There was a noticeable rise at the back of the corset on the standard pattern. I straighten the top edge and bring it to the edge of the lacing area at a straight angle, while keeping it slightly raised in the middle at the front. I trim the top edge of the corset following the newly marked cutting line. Next, I unpin the pieces and adjust the bottom edge of the corset the same way. I pin the pieces together from the waistline to the bottom. And I redraw the bottom edge of the corset. The central bottom corner at the front of the corset was also placed rather low on the standard pattern. I want to make the bottom edge of the front smoother, so I shift the corner 2 centimeters upwards. I trim the corset at the bottom following the newly marked cutting line. The pattern is ready. Now I only need to make a pattern of the decorative lay-on element, which will be placed at either side of the corset. I pin together the side pieces of the front and the back at the bottom following the side seam line. and I draw the lay-on side element. This element is not supposed to cover up the waistline. It will start below the cinture. I don't account for any seam allowances on this element because it will be framed in leather. I will transfer the piece on tracing paper and use it in the cutting process.